All right, hi guys. I am excited to bring you today to this conversation with Rex Griffin. And he is from the Tulsa NightWriters, just like Jim Laughter. And so we're going to talk to Rex today and ask him some questions and pick his brain about novel writing and get some really good information from him. He's got a few years experience, just a few, right, Rex?
Just a few, yeah.
Just a few. He's got a couple under his belt. So he's got a few things definitely to share with you guys. I'm going to share the screen real quick and I'm going to show you his Amazon author page just so that you can see where you can go to find some more information about him. Here it is right here. So you can take a look, see through there. I like showing you guys the Amazon author page so you can see I'm not making this up. These are real people. They are actually authors. So there's lots of information here about Rex. And one of the things that I find to be the most interesting is that he very much loves the Civil War and writes about the Civil War. And so definitely has some good information, historical information, and therefore has insight into how to do research.
Can you put that page up again for a second,
Yes,
please?
absolutely.
I just want to point something out to you.
Okay, absolutely.
If you see me with horns and the halo there, I won the contest that year too.
Oh, so you won the contest when you dressed in Civil War garb, and you won the contest as the angelic demon.
I've actually won it 3 times.
Oh, have you?
No.
That's fantastic. What were you the third time?
It was a mask contest, and I wore one of these medieval like masks with the doctor with the long nose.
Oh, right.
Where they used to put flowers and stuff in it during the plague.
I just learned about those recently, and what the long nose was for was to pack it with things to cover the smell. Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Yeah, I just learned that. Very cool. So, all right. Well, Rex, I'm going to let you talk for the most part here. I'm sure that I will jump in occasionally, but if you could get us started with how did you decide to start writing? What drove you to become an author?
Well, you'll probably hear every author talk about, well, I wrote my first story when I was a kid, in elementary school, and that goes for me too. And then when I got in high school, I found out didn't just enjoy it, but I was really pretty good at it. Because I wrote on the newspaper, and the kids were lining up to get the newspaper for the stuff I was writing, the school newspaper. So
nice.
At some point later on, and this is going to date me some, I saw the movie All the President's Men, and I was inspired to go into journalism from that. And once I got into the journalism school at OU, I thought, I'm not aggressive enough to be a real good newspaper reporter, but I really like writing, and they've got this professional writing major over here, and I found out I loved that. I got to say, once I got out of college, I got married and had kids and laid it down for many years. Mm-hmm. But many years later, once I was a Civil War reenactor, I was actually at a Civil War reenactment, and there was a guy there that had written his own fiction novel about the 1st Kansas Colored Regiment, which was a regiment in the Civil War. It's very important to Indian Territory, Oklahoma. And I thought, great. And I was all excited to read it. I sat down, I started reading it, and it was terrible. The guy didn't know how to write. It was just, I was sitting there going, it was boring, and I was going, this is terrible. I can do better than this. And the first thing I would do was this, and the second thing I would do is this. And at that point, I'm kind of dawned on me, I'm writing in my own story about it, and that with a lot of people pat me on the back, said, you can do this, you're good at it.
That's awesome. That's the exact reason why I became a teacher. Because I went back to school in my 30s. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do. Like, I wasn't 100% sure. I just knew I needed to do something. And the very first class I sat in was a communications class. And this woman was so boring. It was terrible. And like everybody was sleeping through class. And I was like, I can do better than this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what I do today. So that's interesting to hear you say that.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's very cool. I love that you were looking into journalism and then realized that it was aggressive.
Yeah, different. I still graduated from the J school, but it was, different, a different major within the school.
Did you find that even though you had that degree, that you were able to apply the concepts and the things that you learned about writing toward many other aspects of life?
I still do. Not my education didn't go to waste. I absolutely still, it was the fundamental of my writing, and I still absolutely do it. I studied under a fellow named Jack Bickham, who passed away back in the 90s, but he was a tremendous instructor, and I learned a lot from him.
Mm-hmm. I like to tell my students that anything that we do in our writing classes translates into life skills too.
Yeah, they do.
Mm-hmm.
They do.
It absolutely does. It's all soft skills, and it goes back and forth. So however we learn to communicate well with our audience on paper is how we should be communicating with them in person as well. Transfer those skills. All right, so let's talk some about what your writing process is. What is it that you do when you are sitting down to start writing?
Well, first off, I have to have a trigger. Stephen King talks about the boys in the basement, about igniting your subconscious. I call it KETA, kid in the attic, because to me it's more a super thought than a sub basement kind of thought. But your subconscious is important, and there are ways to trigger your subconscious to say every time you sit down to write, okay, subconscious, get ready, we've got to do this. For me, I actually, and a friend of mine who's a creative coach actually taught me that I take my watch out with a second hand, and for 5 seconds I'll breathe in, and then for 5 seconds I'll breathe out, and I do that for a whole minute. And at the end of that process, number one, you've taken in more oxygen than you're going to all day long, just in that 1 minute.
Wow.
But it also kind of triggers my mind that I'm able to focus at that point. And at that point, I'll sit down and go for 2 or 3 hours. And in 2 or 3 hours, I look up and, oh, what time is it? I got to go do this.
Would you think that that would be a good thing to do when we get stuck in a writer's block situation, just to take some time to breathe, like intentional breathing?
It certainly would help. That's my trigger. Different people have different triggers. I think most writers do something, and it's something they do every time they sit down to write. Habits are important, and you're able to set up a habit that way. I know a lot of writers meditate for a few minutes before they sit down and write. Others might pray or something, but different people do different things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And we've talked about that as far as, the example that Stephen King sets out in his book. He talks about, he gets up and he has his breakfast and he spends some time with Tabitha, but then he goes to his office and closes the door, closes the blinds.
That's the signal. That's his trigger. Close the door, close the blind. We're getting ready to go to work. Yeah.
And his mind knows, because he does it on a consistent basis. It's time to work.
Set the pattern.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I find that going into a dark room with the door shut is the best for me.
Can you pause it for just a second?
Sure. Yes.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. We're back. All right.
Okay.
So further though into your writing process, do you make sure that you're doing a habitual thing every time?
Yeah, it is habit. One thing I used to do when I didn't have as much time, I'm retired now, so I've got time to spend my mornings do it. For a lot of people, different people are different. Some people write better in the evenings. I write better in the mornings when I wake up and I'm fresh before I'm heavily involved in something. But when I work for a living, I didn't have nearly as much time, so I would actually set my alarm, and I'd set it for like an hour, and okay, this hour every day I'm going to dedicate to writing, and that worked as well. I could sit down, set it, and
Right.
for that hour, everything else was blocked out.
Right. So parameters.
Yeah.
Parameters and habitual behavior. A lot of this is about what we do intentionally to train our minds to kick in at it's writing time.
Yep. That's, yeah, like say, train your minds.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right. So more than that, let's dig into the most important part, because, and I've told the students this, I don't know that the most important part really is the writing itself. I think that the most important part comes in the editing and the work that we do after. What do you think of that?
Well, yeah, the process, at least it's been for me, is you write your rough draft, then you edit it, revise it, go through it. And yeah, that's really kind of the bulk of the writing. I know when I wrote Moon of Black Hearts, I actually sat down, I wrote like 200 pages of it. And I sat down going, this isn't good enough. And I literally threw it all out except for about one chapter and started over again. And it was a lot better the second time. But yeah.
Oh, wow. Wow.
That's part of the process. It was hard for me to learn that process, writing's a process. Processes are messy. And sometimes you have to not just revise, but okay, I love that. They say kill your darlings. I love that part, but that doesn't fit. It's got to go.
Right. Absolutely. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And
now you asked me about editing.
Mm-hmm.
I hired an editor, a developmental editor, and she gave me some good ideas, but I got a lot more out of my critique group. I formed I'm a historical fiction novelist.
Mm-hmm.
And at the historical writing conference in Denver a few years ago, several of us got together and formed a writing group. I've got a big long story out of that, but we don't have time for that one here. But and we still are together. That was in 2015. Mm-hmm. We still work together. We've all grown as writers, tremendous deal. And I find the feedback that I get from them has been very helpful. Mm-hmm. The more eyes you get on your work, the more you can get feedback on it.
Right.
And it's important when you get feedback to listen. I've kind of got a rule for myself. When somebody's giving me feedback, and we do this verbally on a conference call. When somebody's giving me feedback, I keep quiet and listen and not say anything unless it's just a question for clarification. What exactly did you mean by that? Yes. Or were you talking about this sentence or that sentence?
You have to stop yourself from being defensive, because our initial reaction when we're not getting critique is to, well, what I meant was.
Yeah. And that's kind of universal. I was at a workshop, and a big part of it was that kind of thing. And there was a guy there that every time I said something to him, he's like, well, I really meant this, or no, you don't understand. And it really got frustrating. And I thought, this guy isn't learning anything. Mm-hmm.
No, you have to be open. We have to be willing to listen to the critiques of others. And their assignment currently was last week and this week is to form a focus group, whether it was with coworkers or friends or family members, and to share their writing project ideas. Mm-hmm. And to get feedback, and then to discuss that feedback in a discussion thread. And yeah, I know it's a really like scary step. Mm-hmm. When this is a new thing. I would say the more or the longer time we spend as writers, and the more we come to value the feedback of others, that becomes the part that you crave. Like, I need your insights. I need to look at my work. I need your perspective, because it's like the longer we are at this, the more we realize we don't know.
Yeah, the more you know, you don't know. The more you know, you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you're right. The more eyes on the work, I'm only two-dimensional, right? I can only think the way I think. I can't see everything the way as many other people out there can see it. They can point out things that I don't see.
Right. Right. And there's always going to be something that you don't see.
Always, always.
Always. We have in my Comp 1 class, we read The Man Who Loved Flowers, Stephen King, which is in the Night Shift collection. And there's a spot in there where I would dare to critique him. There's something that I see that he didn't see.
Oh yeah, my favorite novel of all time is Lonesome Dove.
Mm-hmm.
And if you ever read Lonesome Dove, great novel. If you ever read it, he head hops from one paragraph to the next. He switches viewpoints. This guy will be in his head, and then this you'll be in another. But it didn't ruin it for me. But I can go back and say, hey, you need to do this and this.
Right. There definitely could be a way to make this tighter,
Mm-hmm.
where it could flow more, something. Right. And that's good. I mean, it's good. And we get, the more that we look at the writing of others as well, we find ourselves better able to look at our own writing objectively.
Oh, absolutely. I strongly suggest reading outside your genre, because if I'm writing, I love historical fiction. If I'm reading it, I can get caught up in it. But if I'm reading a detective story, I'm not as caught up in it, so I can get a better idea of the quality of this writer and what he does to make his writing good.
Mm-hmm.
And there are great writers in all genres. Just because you don't read romance, say, does not mean there are great writers in that.
Right.
So there are a lot of great writers out there. And I sit down with a pencil or a pen, and as I'm writing, I'm marking on a book every time that,
yes,
okay, I like this part. I see what they did here. They delve deep into emotions on this one by looking in their eyes, and
right.
basically dissect it while I'm reading it. Very, very important. You get to see what other people do and how you can apply it to your own writing.
Exactly. And I love that suggestion that you should read outside of your genre.
Oh, absolutely. It's kind of easier to see. Another thing is, if you've got a favorite author,
mm-hmm.
read the very first book they wrote, because it's like anything else. The more you do, the better you get at it. So you're going to see the raw skills better in their earliest works than than in their ninth book in the series. By then they're going to have it down pat. And it'll be a little harder to see the nuts and bolts of it than it will in the very first book.
That's interesting. And that's funny, because I actually I read On Writing by Stephen King before I read Salem's Lot. And as I was reading Salem's Lot, I'm like, wait a minute. This is full of adverbs, sir.
Yeah.
Full of adverbs. And then you're the one who comes along and says, don't use adverbs. They're the tools of timid writers. Mm-hmm. So that's exactly what you're talking about right there. Is his skills grew and changed and honed as he wrote more and more and more. And that's not to say that Salem's Lot isn't a good novel, because it is. Mm-hmm. But it is so full of adverbs.
Well, yeah, you don't want to use adverbs, but there's always never say never. There are always exceptions to everything. A good writer can if they know the rules and are skilled in using them, they know when to break the rules. Right. And that can be very effective for a writer.
That's true. And in fiction, we do have that opportunity to break the rules, but I like what you said. We need to know the rules.
You have to know the rules to be able to break them effectively. Otherwise, you just kind of throwing stuff up against the wall and see if it sticks.
Right. Otherwise, stick to the rules. All right. And so I know from talking earlier, prior to when we started recording, that you mentioned that you are a fan of structure. So
I learned, this is how I learned it. And I learned the scene sequel structure, and you'll hear this a million different ways. James Scott Bell calls it the lock method, lead, object, conflict, knockout. The way I learned it was goal, object, disaster. You've got your viewpoint character who goes into a scene. He has a goal in this scene. He or she has a goal they want to accomplish. When they go into the scene, they have to have conflict. Conflict is the fuel of fiction. We'd love to, in my life, I don't want any hassles in my life. I don't want the air conditioner to break down. I don't want, my car to have a flat tire. I don't want a million things to happen. But if you write that in a story, that is boring. Yes. Nobody wants to read a story where that happens. They want to read a story about somebody who overcomes great obstacles to reach their goal. So in the scene, you have your viewpoint character, not always the protagonist, a viewpoint character. They have a goal they're trying to achieve in this scene. They have conflict. Something comes in conflict, whether it's the antagonist or some other elements. You'll have beats that go back and forth where it's, he's going to win, he's going to lose, he's going to win, he's going to lose. The beats that go back and forth. And you have to have an ending to the scene. The better, you want your ending to be a setback. I learned it goal, conflict, disaster, because the greater the setback, the better for your story. The bigger a disaster it is, the better it is for your story to make your readers read more. The object is to get them turning pages. And for me, and for a lot, you want them to think about your story after they're done. But I'm kind of getting ahead of myself there. That scene, after the scene comes the sequel. This is where this same viewpoint character, after getting this huge setback, this disaster, first is they have an emotional reaction to it, their initial reaction. Then their dilemma, that is their thought process where they think about it. Okay, what happened? What do I do now? Then they make a decision. Okay, this has happened to me. I need to do such and such. This is my decision. And then action, the first step into the next scene.
Right.
That way you can build a story step by step with scene and sequel. Scene, goal, conflict, disaster. Sequel, reaction, dilemma, decision, action.
Okay, and sequel went, I'm writing this down. Sequel went after disaster?
After disaster, yeah.
Okay.
Scene and then sequel. Now, the Donald Moss and I kind of got into a little argument over this one time. He said sequel's no longer a thing. And I said, it absolutely is. They just hide it. A sequel, instead of having a sequel separate from the scene, you'll layer the sequel in as you go through the scene. He'll have his thought processes. He may react, when the conflict first comes about, and have his thought processes or her as the conflict goes on, and then make a decision. And of course, the action is the first step into the next scene.
Right. I'll put that down. I like that.
And that's my college education in a nutshell,
right there.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, I'm glad that you got that, because I added it, and I'm going to write it down, and I'm going to add it into my stuff.
Yeah.
Learning, guys, always be learning, always be growing and adding to your repertoire. Always. Like, I've always got something to write with and something to write on.
While I'm on the subject, I mentioned Donald Moss. If you're looking for good writing advice, anything Donald Moss writes is great. MAASS, Donald Moss. James Scott Bell is another guy. I like Lisa Cron's Story Genius. A lot of people don't, some people don't.
Mhm.
I found it very enlightening, but anything written by Donald Moss. And here's something else to know. There's a website called Writer Unboxed, UNBOXED, like out of the box.
Mhm.
Writerunboxed.com is a great website, has a lot of the top writers in the English language
Okay.
contribute to it, including Donald Moss. I think Bell's in there. A fellow named Dave Corbett's really good, and a multitude of others. Go on that. That's a great website for writers.
Okay. I will absolutely check that out. Add that to something that we do as well. I would love to have websites to give to the students so that, number one, just so that they know that they don't have to be lone rangers. Like this is not something that we do singular. This is something that we do with other writers.
Yes. Yes, you need to have a writing community. You make writing friends. But when you sit down at the keyboard, you're alone.
Yes.
And as Bernard Cornwell says, you're writing into the abyss. and everybody does it different.
Yes.
There's there's as many different ways to write as there are people. Everybody goes about it from a different angle, and you pick up things along the way from from innumerable sources.
Yeah, always be just watching. I love people.
Oh, absolutely.
People
pick it up.
My favorite sport.
Pick it up from other writers. Pick it up in writing books. If you get a chance to go to conferences, those are helpful. Groups like the Tulsa NightWriters are really helpful.
Yes.
Workshops. I've been to several workshops. Those were enormously helpful.
When I was in St. Louis, I lived in St. Louis for over 20 years, and I was going to author talks at the library often. They would have big name authors come through the St. Louis Public Library and have intimate setting conversations with people where you could come and get your book signed and sit and listen to them talk about writing. And oh, it was lovely. I heard Barbara Delinsky one time and just fell in love with her. So I started reading all of her books, like every Barbara Delinsky book I could get a hold of, I was reading, because she was such a lovely woman. And then I got to see J.A. Jance, and I was not impressed.
Oh.
But just a personal preference, but I enjoyed her books. So It was fine. Now, my favorite one was hearing Wally Lamb speak. And he read from his Christmas book to us. And like, I could have cuddled up with a blanket near a fireplace and just listened to his voice. It was absolutely lovely. But yes, we need to be, as writers, engaging in the writing community and taking the opportunity to learn and to listen and to ask questions and to get critique. And
I've got some great friends, the writers. I've got some of my best friends are writers that I've met through that kind of thing, through workshops and whatnot. We'll take retreats together over at the Writers Colony in Eureka Springs from time to time.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's interesting.
You know about the Writers Colony in Eureka Springs?
Never heard of it.
Look it up. The Writers Colony at Dairy Hollow is literally, they've got a couple of old houses that they've refurbished, and it's strictly for writers to come, and they don't have TVs, and you can't have radio. It's for people to come and sit and write, and the rooms are set up for writers. And it's the neatest little place on the end of Spring Street. Beautiful. If you've never been to Eureka Springs, beautiful place. You can sit there and write. If you need to get out and go walk the town, it's a great town to walk in. It's just really a kind of a unique place. They've got a lady that comes in and fixes supper every evening, except on weekends. So the writers will come out of their rooms, and 6 o'clock we'll all sit down and eat and talk writing. And
Oh, how wonderful.
it's really a great place.
That is so lovely. That sounds like heaven. No
It
TV.
is kind of, it's a great writers retreat place for writers.
Definitely
retreat.
look that
And
up.
there's other places around the country that do that too.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
No idea. That's fantastic. Thank you for that insight there. Appreciate
You're
it.
welcome. Just leave $1 in a tip jar.
Right. Do you have any other specific advice that you would want to give to new and emerging writers?
Can I have a few minutes on this?
Yes.
First off, write from your heart. Write what you want to write. That's important.
Yes.
One thing I want to talk, can I talk a little bit about something that's important to me? It's emotions.
Yes.
So many times a writer will write, and whenever a character will have an emotion, they'll write the first emotion that comes into their head, the initial emotion, and then go on from there. And a reader reads that, and they're going to go, yeah, okay, that's the way I'd feel too. And then they go on, and it doesn't stick. They don't remember it. But emotions are not that simple. And the best books create emotions in the reader. What you want to do, there's like 3 levels of emotion. The first level is the expected emotion, the one that I just talked about, the surface emotion. Beneath that, there's always an emotion that drives the initial emotion. Okay. Guy tells a girl, I want to break up with you. She's angry and upset. Okay, that's the initial emotion. The hidden emotion, the second level emotion, would probably be something that she's scared to be alone, which is a different emotion than the initial emotion. She's really her fear of being alone. The third level emotion, as you dig down into it, is the unexpected emotion.
Yes.
This is something, often a surprise emotion, and nothing better to surprise the reader than for the character to surprise themselves. In my example here, okay, the girl's scared to be alone, and then maybe she thinks, hey, I'm finally rid of this jerk. I've been putting up with this for so long. Why, what do I feel bad about? Why don't I, I've got all these opportunities. So then that's just a small example. There's as many emotions as there are people on any given minute of any given day. But look, don't just settle for that surface emotion.
Right.
Look for the deeper emotions, because those are the ones that the reader's not going to just skim over. Those are the ones that's going to make them go, wait a minute.
Right.
This is a real person I'm reading about here. I understand that. I can bond with that person. Then it means more to the reader, and they're not just reading your story and getting to the end going on something else. They read your story and think, how would I feel in that situation? And they might, the greatest, if you look on Amazon on my book, my favorite comment on there, a lady said after she read it, she thought about it for 3 or 4 days. And I thought,
nice.
That's what you
right.
want. That's what you want, is for your reader to be affected by it, to ignite emotions in the reader, not just put emotions on page.
Right. And we have to get to that place where we're unafraid to write about what's truly authentic in those emotions.
Yes.
Go for it. Go for the authenticity, because it's unexpected. It is something that is going to make the reader go, oh, I can't believe they wrote that.
Yeah, and I forget what author said this, but how they wrote, they said they sit down at the typewriter, open a vein and bleed.
Yes.
In other words, they wrote from the inside. They wrote what matters to them. They let all their emotions out on the page, because you can't, when you write about these deeper emotions, you're really writing about your own emotions.
That's
You're
right.
not writing about emotions other people, because you don't really live their lives, but you've got your own experience, the emotions you've felt to do this. You're combining your own memories. And another thing, and as you were talking about before we got on here, world building, setting, that's another thing about your own emotions, tapping into the memories of your readers. When you write settings, it's not about what this park bench looked like. It's about what that park bench meant to the person, to the viewpoint character who's viewing it. A lot of times, don't forget all the sensory perceptions to put in. It's not just human beings are visual. Yes, you can see something and you write what it looks like, but it's more than that. And again, the visual alone, the reader may see that, read it, okay, that's what it is, skim over it and go on to the next thing. Combined with their memories, feelings, tactical feelings, fingertip feelings, hearing, sounds will ignite memories in your reader. Smells are better than anything, because it just so, and I'm not a brain surgeon by any means, but it just so happens the memory receptors are closest to your olfactory receptors than any other of the senses. So your olfactory is actually, your sense of smell actually combines to your memory quicker and more closely than the rest of your memory, than any other memory. So if you're talking about the Civil War, and you've got a bunch of guys firing their weapons, this black powder smelled like rotten eggs because of the sulfur. So you write down there the smell of rotten eggs, everybody knows what rotten eggs smell like. That will trigger their memory. They will put themselves in the scene.
Yes. And
remember it far better than just there were a bunch of guys lined up firing their weapons.
And it smelled bad.
And it smelled bad, yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing about you, I'm going to keep talking to you, shut me off here in a second. Another thing about a scene, and I just lost my train of thought. Another thing about it is, dadgummit, I did lose my train of thought. When you're describing something, if you're like describing a group endeavor, you'll see it over and over again about how, like the farmer's market I went to last weekend, you'll describe all these people at a farmer's market. It's far better. Once again, the reader will read that, okay, I see it, skim over it. It's far better to pick out one person to use as an example in any given situation, and whatever they do, let them represent the whole. Specifics always are more important than general generics.
Yes.
Instead of describing the whole thing, pick out one person or one thing and describe that. Details matter.
Yes.
Have you ever been, I'm asking you students here, have you ever been to the Oklahoma City Memorial, the bombing memorial? If you haven't, you ought to go. Now, I can tell you, okay, this guy blew up the Oklahoma City bombing memorial, and there were so many kids killed, and they've got people and children and all that. And you'll understand that on an intellectual level. But if you go through the Oklahoma City bombing memorial, they'll have the opening intro, and then you'll walk through day by day the stuff they had. And it's, although you may understand it on an intellectual level, it's the seeing a baby's doll with an arm torn off, covered in concrete dust. It's a woman's purse that's had the handle ripped off. It's a man's glasses with the shattered lenses and blood on the outside. The details will have far more impact on your reader, far more emotional impact than just explaining what happened.
Right. Oh, you got me right there. I mean, I was right there.
Yeah. Well, I
Those
guarantee
little
you,
details.
if you've never been through there, it's like
I haven't been to the memorial. I actually was in Oklahoma City right after it happened and went down to the bombing site and saw the building before it was demolished completely. And that was.
Yeah. Well, you go through the memorial, and if you keep your eyes dry when you walk out, you're a pretty hardcore person. I couldn't.
Yeah. Those are good things for us to go and experience as writers, so that we can tap into emotions ourselves and sit and watch and consider the important details and think about those things that are going to be the ones that stay with you, that you take home, and then write those things. I think that's an excellent practice. I know that I have a time or two when I have needed to write particular scenes. I have actually driven to places similar to what I wanted to write and just sat and experienced it and soaked it up so that I could even begin to effectively write it.
That's a good idea.
So one time was in the forest. I wanted to, my character was going to go for a run down this path in a forest area, and I needed to go and sit in the middle of the forest alone in the quiet and just listen and experience. And it was incredible. And I ended up writing several pages of just the forest experience to set up what was about to happen, the unexpected event that was going to occur there in the forest that broke through the silence. So, but it was lovely. Yeah, I drove there and went and sat and just experienced.
One thing, as a writer, it's important to challenge yourself. You always want to stretch your creativity, try to be better, try to stretch your ideals. That's why they call it writer unboxed. Think out of the box. As you were talking, it reminded me, I don't know if you've talked about plotter and pantser. I tend to be a bit of a plotter.
Just a little bit.
But it's like a spectrum, and everybody's just somewhere on the same spectrum. Those are absolutes, and nobody's the absolute. But kind of what I'm driving at here, sometimes I will just write description of something, and I may write for a couple of pages and just kind of pouring it out, and suddenly I'll say something, and that's what I'm looking for. That's the right thing. And I may or may not throw the rest of it away.
Mm-hmm.
It's a messy process. Yes. Writing is messy. Yes. They say you have to learn to kill your darlings at some point. Yeah, I've written this, I love it, but it doesn't fit the story, so it's out.
Right, save it for something else.
Yeah, but if you find the right thing, it's like finding treasure. Oh, and it's not something you sit and think, oh, I need to write this. No, it's a process. You're pouring your thoughts out, and suddenly the gem will just appear in front of you.
The best things come when we're not pushing it, when we're not forcing it, when we're just letting our creative self go. That's when the good things come.
That's creativity. Mm-hmm. That's when it comes out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if we're sitting down and we're just constantly and this is something that I know that the students struggle with not doing, is writing a line and go, oh, I don't like that, and then backspace, or writing a line, oh, I don't like that, and fixing it. No, just write. Leave that line exactly the way it is. Just keep going.
Yeah, you get it on paper. You can always change it later, revise. Another thing, and I tell my critique partners this all the time, don't hold your characters back. Don't let him be, oh, he almost did this, or he thought about doing that, or she felt like doing such and such, but she knew it was wrong and didn't do it. Screw that.
Right.
Let them go. Let your characters do all the things that they, let them go over the top. Let them do all those things that break all the societal's rules.
Yes.
If it's too over the top, you can always dial it back a little on revision, but don't hold your characters back. Your characters need to be bigger than life. That's not the only thing that makes a good story, but that's important to a good story.
Yes.
A good novel is like a great tapestry. It takes all the different elements weaved together to create one great whole, one great whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
All the elements are important. It's important to work on your skills for all the different elements, but it's the weaving together that really builds your story up. One thing I like to do, I probably don't do enough of it, is challenge myself with writing exercises. And that's another reason I like, you'll find a lot of, another reason I like Donald Moss. You'll find, and he does this, and you'll find this in a lot of books that people write. They'll challenge you with exercises. Try this, apply this to your story. What would your character do? And those will bring out your character. It'll bring out you want your protagonist to be, they talk about flawed characters, but you want them to be in conflict, in inner conflict.
Mm-hmm.
You want the best characters, the ones that stand out the most, have inner conflicts they have to overcome. And the best example I can think of is Spock from the old Star Trek series.
Right.
What a perfect character, because he's half human and half Vulcan. His logical side is always at war with his emotional sides. It's constant back and forth within him. Right. And don't we all on some level struggle between the logical and the emotional?
Yes.
So I think and he's a character that really sticks out. Mm-hmm. That's the best characters are conflicted characters.
You know, I have a lesson in my Comp 2 class where I have an entire PowerPoint on logos, pathos, and ethos that's centered around Spock and Bones and Captain Kirk.
Oh, okay.
And okay, but Rex, the more years that go by, the more students look at me with blank stares like,
I'm sure. And
I'm like, what is happening? How am I getting old? I don't know. How do you not know Captain Kirk? How do you not know who Spock is?
Well, I'm just hoping they know who Spock is. But even the movies, not even just a television show, even the movies are old now.
I know. So. It's wild because those things are still pertinent to me. Like, yeah. You said Spock, and I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. Connecting with your memory. Absolutely. Yeah.
That was perfectly relatable because I understand his character. He did have a lot of internal conflict because he would have emotions, but he didn't want to show those. He wasn't going to let anybody know that he had emotions. And I think that's, like you said, it's one of the fantastic things about his characters. We knew he had internal conflict. And so your reader knows that your character has internal conflict, but not the other characters do. And that's important to build. That makes your character so true to life, because we as people have complex thought processes and emotions. So let your characters, I like how Rex said that, just let them go.
Yeah, let them go. Don't hold them back.
Let them be wild.
Complicate their lives.
Yes.
Make everything hard for them. If it comes easy, nobody wants to read it. It's people overcome great things.
Right.
That's what's really important.
Right.
Do I have a few minutes to talk here?
Yes.
one thing, your protagonist, now everybody knows what a protagonist is. He or she is the lead of your story. A lot of people, we have our everyman protagonist, our rank and file human being, Joe Blow or Joe Average out there. How do you make him stand out on the page? Show what's special about him, what makes him special.
Right.
He may be super determined, but show what makes him stand out from other people.
Oh, see, this reminds me of a lesson. I'm gonna let you get right back to that, but I'm whispering because the students are gonna be like, oh, cringe. But this reminds me of a lesson that we had earlier in the semester where I said that we needed to give our characters quirks. And some people didn't like the word quirk. And I'm like, make them unique. They have to be unique in some way. Oh, and Rex is saying that too.
Well, yes, I am. Absolutely. They all, some of the best, you need a good backstory on them. Everybody has a childhood. What happened to their childhood to make them who they are? Lisa Cron writes that you need to do, you need to write 3 different scenes from your main character's childhood that you're never going to see the story, but it'll help you understand your character, and it absolutely does. What they learned in their first scene from childhood that's a misbelief, how in the second scene that was elaborated on, and in the third scene how as they got older this kind of cemented it in their conscience. So when your story starts, it's always, their story is going to be about how they overcome this misbelief they learned in their childhood.
Wow.
But characters all have childhoods. And for me, I like that. To write the 3 scenes, you really know your character intimately when you're done. And if you do it for all your main characters, I know that's a lot of writing, but the more you write, the better your story's going to be. The more you put into it, the better it's going to be. The one thing, Patricia Cornwell talking about writers out of my genre, I could care less about, morgue investigations, but she's a tremendous writer. Even her minor characters have deep backstories. She's really good, but I digress. I do a lot of that. My first point, when you introduce a character in your story, your protagonist, you want your average Joe Average protagonist, you want to emphasize what makes them special. If you've got a superhero protagonist, it's just the opposite. You want to show what makes them human, what makes them normal. If it's Superman, every time he flies through the air and lands, he lands on some chewing gum. Something that makes them where they go, oh crap, I gotta get that. You want to bring them down to earth and make them normal. The 2 other kinds of protagonists are the damaged protagonists, like the Wolfman, or often a vampire or something. What you need to bring out in them is longing to be normal.
Right.
The great, Frankenstein. That's even before my time, by the way. Frankenstein, he just wanted to be normal. He wanted to be normal. He couldn't be, but that's all he wanted. He wanted to sit down with people. He sat down a real little girl and threw the stuff in there and ended up throwing her in there. But, he was trying to be normal.
Right.
And the 4th kind of protagonist is kind of like the rogue protagonist, the bad guy. But the way to make him relatable is to make him self-aware that he is the bad guy, or he is a bad guy, and maybe put a little humor in on it. Right. I don't know if I'm probably dating myself with this, but if you ever saw the series Dexter, about the serial killer who killed other serial killers,
Right.
He was kind of tongue in cheek, and he knew he was a serial killer. So he had standards. He only killed other serial killers, which always made me wonder, would he run out of victims at some point? But it was set in Florida, so
Yeah,
there's
never.
bound to be serial killers around every corner down there. But my point being, he needed to be self-aware so the reader can relate to him, can bond with him.
Right. I'll tell you, did you ever read A Good Man is Hard to Find by Flannery O'Connor?
No.
It's a short story. It was written back in the 50s. But in that piece, her main character is a escaped convict named the Misfit. And he ends up in conflict with the other main character, the grandmother. And so our grandmother character is a very pious, religious old woman who wears her hat a certain way with a flower stuck in it and a very nice dress, so that if they get in an accident, anyone who comes across her body is going to know she was a lady, like she was a good Christian. But then we've got the Misfit who's like, I don't even know what I did to get in prison. Nobody ever told me, And so these two characters at the end, they come to a time of conflict between the two of them. And it's really interesting the way Flannery unfolds it, because you find yourself having more compassion for the Misfit because he becomes so real, because he lists out who he has been, what he has done. I don't know how I became this person. And if I had ever met Jesus, I wouldn't be this person. I know it, but lady, I never met him, And this whole time she's going, but pray. And it turns out that she's the one who's fake and he's the one who's real. And it's very interesting. It's very interesting that getting inside of the bad guy's head and discovering that he's a person.
Even more than that, connecting with his heart, longing. He's, nothing more powerful than rooting for a guy who's trying to do the right thing, even if he can't, is held back by whatever. I say guy, male or female,
right,
the protagonist.
Right.
That's super important.
We have to make these characters human.
One other thing, my mind's jumping all over here.
No.
This is what a story. What is a story about? Oh, I don't have the thing in front of me. A story is about someone who faces problems, faces challenges, and how faces challenges they can't avoid, and how they are changed in the process. Your character, when they start out, they're going to start out at point A. They're going to go through these conflicts. They're going to face obstacles. They're going to overcome them, and they are going to change in the process. And it's good that every once in a while to look back on where he's been or where she's been, what she's done, how she feels now as opposed to how she felt then, what's changed about her. Till the end, in the end, your character is going to be a different person than it was at the beginning.
That character's arc, the change that occurs. They have to grow in some way. Otherwise, why are you telling the story?
Yeah.
Why does it matter? And story matters.
Or conversely, it could be about a person who, and I can't imagine, but I'm sure some great writer has written about somebody who didn't change despite all what they went through.
That's true. That is an interesting concept.
Yeah. Just gave me a story idea right there.
Right. You better jot that down.
Yeah.
I've got notes all over the desk in front of me. I've been writing things down the whole time we've been talking. But we are at an hour, Rex, so I want to be cognizant of your time, but the students as well. So I so much have enjoyed this.
Well,
And
thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I could go on and on, but I didn't really structure it. So I'm just coming up with stuff that, oh yeah,
Right.
you know,
And
I
I like
remember,
that.
yeah, I didn't think of that before.
I think it's
So,
nice to just have a conversation about
yeah.
writing, because if we were to run into each other at a restaurant, oh, you're a writer, this is what we would do. We
Yeah.
would talk just like this, and this is what's authentic. So I like that. I'm calling these conversations.
Okay.
So I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's been fun.
It has been
I'll
fun.
probably go for the rest of the night talking, thinking, oh, I should have said this and I should have said that. But
Well, I'm sure we could come up with a part 2. That would be fine.
okay, maybe we can do that.
All right.
Maybe I'll drill you all in Civil War drill or something.
Oh, yes. That would be
That would be fun.
fantastic.
Yeah. I'm sure
We can
that'd
absolutely
go over
do.
big at TCC. But
Yeah. And
all
maybe
right.
we could compile at some point, and this thought's just coming to me. Maybe it's not going to be something that's doable this semester, but maybe in the future, a panel of you all from Tulsa NightWriters, to
That'd be
have a
cool.
Q&A session with the students, I think would be something that would be interesting. And I'll keep track of each of the students as they go through my classes and be able to like invite them to such an event. I think that would be nice as well.
Can I do a quick plug?
Yes.
Anybody's invited to go to my website, frontieronfire.com. I've got writing advice. If you look on the bar on the top under writing advice, I've written a bunch of articles. You're free to come make comment. And if you're interested in my book, feel free to buy one, but it will probably be free for Kindle I'm thinking about putting it up for free on April 30th and on Cinco de Mayo, May 5th.
Okay.
So I got 2 days left to do it for free on Kindle KDP Select. So
Okay, very good. I will put this information in with the description of the video. I will be posting the video to Blackboard where their course shell is. It'll be posted there. But with your permission, I'm also going to post it on YouTube.
Sure.
On my channel.
My book that's out is Moon of Black Hearts. If you go on my website, you'll get the first chapter of my second novel, Time to Strike. And I'd love all the feedback you want to give me on either one.
All right, fantastic. Well, thank you, Rex.
Thank you for having me.
This has been a pleasure.
Been fun for me.
Yeah, have a great rest of your day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.